I want to we were talking about those executive actions and orders that will be issued today, that flurry of activity by the president. They will sign some of them in front of this crowd. And we just heard from Ed O'Keefe. I want to go to congressional correspondent Nicole Killian because she's on Capitol Hill. And of course, one of the other big stories involves TikTok. What do we know about that, Nicole? Because just to remind everybody, this ban on TikTok, the required divestiture, was passed by Congress, signed in a bipartisan way, signed by President Biden, and now Donald Trump says he wants to undo that.
Yeah, that's right. And soon after he is sworn in here at the Capitol, President-elect Trump says he intends to issue that executive order to prevent the TikTok ban from taking place. Of course, a lot of users were surprised to get those notifications over the weekend saying that the service was not available, only to find out a couple of hours later that service was restored. TikTok putting out a statement thanking, quote, the efforts of President Trump. And of course, the president-elect has said that this executive order would basically extend the period of time before the law's prohibitions take place. And so, as you mentioned, of course, that law passed by Congress just last year that would require TikTok to be sold off by its Chinese parent company ByteDance in order to keep operating. Now, the president-elect says that he prefers to see some type of joint venture where a U.S. entity would get a 50% ownership stake in some potential deal, but that remains to be seen. In the meantime, there are a number of congressional Republicans who believe that the law should stand as is, particularly because Congress passed it. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court, but the president-elect is still moving forward today with that executive order. And worth noting that TikTok CEO Xiao Chu is expected to be here for the inauguration, Nora.
Nicole Killian, thank you. We're going to keep talking about these executive orders, but I just have to pause for a moment because Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton has issued a very stern warning after this and has said that any company that hosts, distributes services, or otherwise facilitates the communist-controlled TikTok could face hundreds of billions of dollars of ruinous liability under the law. So we see someone who is clearly in the MAGA camp, rebuking those companies, warning them that they should not put TikTok back up. And at the same time, there are a lot of concerns out there as well about what does this mean if a president can, with the stroke of a pen, undo what has been passed by a bipartisan Congress and upheld by the Supreme Court. I may ask Senator Blunt about that.
I think that circumstance, it could be a huge problem. I wasn't in the Senate the last 2 years, so I haven't read the law carefully. I heard yesterday that if there is a viable purchase in place, the president has some power under the law to suspend the law. Otherwise, I don't know how you suspend the law. It's passed by the Congress, signed by the president, the law of the country, though there may be this viable purchase option, and maybe he decides there is one.
But Tom Cotton's position, who is the head of the Senate Intel Committee, is that law would mean that 90-day extension would have been required to have viable and significant progress on a deal prior to January 19th. And that's where the stickiness is now. We're now past that, and he's trying to invoke a 90-day extension, also saying he wants a joint venture with the government of China, which I believe is not legal. But maybe trying to gesture to what China does.
I sat by Tom Cotton for 4 years on the Intel Committee. He's not to be trifled with.
Senator, he's definitely a hunk.
Can I ask you a question, Senator, about these executive orders more broadly? It's the theme of the day. It's certainly the theme of the beginning of the Trump administration. Mike Lee once said about executive orders, the president is not a king. There was a period where Republican senators in particular did not like executive orders. Help us understand how you see those in the context of a government that was built with checks and balances between the power of the presidency and the power of Congress.
Well, what presidents mostly do now is they reverse the last executive orders. So you could argue they're trying to get back to where it was before the other person issued their executive orders. I think it's a huge problem. Every president starts the presidency in this same way. This may be a little more dramatic than others. I don't know, but they all start it the same way, and find out in some cases they don't have the power to do what they hope to do, just like President Biden did about student loans. President Trump may find out the same thing about the 14th Amendment and birthright citizenship. But we need to, one of the problems here is, John, like the Iranian agreement, it's only as good as the president who is willing to support it. The presidents need to make the effort to get the Congress to make this a permanent treaty, a permanent agreement about Paris climate. If they can't do that, they should realize that we're moving forward here on shaky ground, and whatever we do could be immediately changed by the next president. And I'd like to see every president do a better job of getting permanently done what they think ought to be done, rather than temporarily done what they think should be done. Though I understand why President Trump is doing this today, because he's reversing a lot of things that President Biden did 4 years ago today.
Well, but some of these go beyond that and are probably, like you just said, going to go to the Supreme Court with the 14th Amendment and trying to end birthright citizenship, which is what the government interprets as the Constitution saying those born on American soil are citizens at birth, regardless of their parents' immigration status. He says no longer the case. That raises a lot of practical questions about what does that mean for people currently in that status, and then those coming here. Also, I would flag for that executive order trying to end asylum by decree. Asylum under international law is a human right, that you can flee persecution and come and ask for it. We have seen President Biden test that with that executive order that he just put in place right before the election to try to drive down those crossing the border. That's already in the courts. So that is already being pressed. Him trying to today end asylum by decree would say, if you are politically persecuted, you are not welcome in the United States of America as a safe haven.
Yeah. Of course, the problem is that over 90% of the people that claim asylum by decree don't get it
under
when they
current
go to
law,
court.
which is why you'd go to Congress to change that.
I understand.
But to change that law.